to Culture Conversations, the podcast where we break down what's shaping workplace, culture, behaviour and leadership. I'm Macdara.
And I'm George, and this is episode 3. And what we're going to be talking about today is our recently conducted survey, the themes that came out of that, the insights, but also the report that we produced with key findings and recommendations. So first of all, we wanted to say a sincere thanks to everyone who took part in the survey. We've received some incredible engagement and feedback. The data, the insights are rich, and we, hope you've had a chance to read the report. If you've not yet had a chance to do so, we'll publish the link to the report in the show notes, and there's also a quick reference table if you'd prefer to have something that takes slightly less time to read and understand. So, Macdara, what are we going to be talking about in today's episode?
So today we're going to talk about toxicity and culture change in organisations. We had 4 kind of key topics come out of the survey. So the 2 we're going to cover today, toxicity and culture change. We're going to split the report survey into 2 episodes, and in the second episode we're going to look at values to action, leadership, trust, are people backing up what they've said with action, and feedback and recognition, which is always a hot topic for people in terms of whether it's there or not. So today, toxicity and culture change is what we're going to look at.
Fantastic. So with that, let's jump in.
So jumping in, George, toxicity, which can be a bit difficult to say, is our first topic, and this has become a bit more of a theme out there. Definitely, for anyone interested in the people side of things. For me and everyone else, could you explain a bit more about what toxicity is in the workplace?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'd maybe start with a bit of a real life kind of example of where organisations are focused on toxicity, and then use that as part of the example. So on the way here this morning, actually, I went into a branch of Leon. Obviously, other coffee brands and chains are available to people.
Indeed, for balance. Yeah.
For balance. But I noticed on the counter it had a placard or a laminated sheet that basically said certain types of behaviour towards our staff won't be tolerated.
Okay.
So abusive behaviour, mistreating our staff, raising your voice, acting in a physical way that you might intimidate a member of staff won't be tolerated.
Okay.
If you act in a certain way, you'll be barred from the premises and we won't serve you anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that for me is a real life example of where an organisation is protecting their staff from the kinds of toxic behaviours.
Yeah.
I think for me and for us, toxicity can manifest itself in a number of ways, right? So it could be a conscious behaviour or characteristic that you might demonstrate towards someone. It could be an unconscious characteristic or behaviour that you might demonstrate towards someone. Equally, it could be verbal, it might be non-verbal.
Yeah.
But I think the key point to take away is that it is things like abusive behaviour, raising your voice to an inappropriate level, things that could make someone potentially feel unsafe or like they're not in an environment where they feel comfortable operating.
Yeah.
So I think it really is that negative behaviour, again, that might not be deliberate, but it can have a really lasting, meaningful effect on people, particularly in the workplace.
Yeah. And I guess it's one of those that's very subjective, right? Some people's tolerance for aggressive behaviour may be a lot higher than others. So ultimately it's about how that person feels from the behaviour. Okay, so thank you for that. That's helpful just to set the context and so we understand. So can you tell us then a bit more about what the survey told us about how people are feeling about this topic?
Yeah, so I think, certain things jumped out of the survey for us, right? Yeah. And this was clearly, one of the key topics that we wanted to talk to people about and share some of our insights as well.
Yeah.
So I think significantly, the way that we constructed the survey was to have an element of quantitative questions and an element of qualitative. So this was one of the quantitative questions where people were asked to provide a positive statement, whether they agreed with the question or negative. So it was strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. And this was actually one of the 2 questions that received the most negative response. So 4 out of 10 respondents indicated that toxic behaviours, toxicity in the workplace weren't being dealt with in the way that they would like or they would expect, and therefore impliedly they were being tolerated.
Yeah.
You know, the point around tolerance, what we've spoken about quite a bit, is the inability or the inaction to deal with toxicity. You know, I think back to one of my favourite quotes, and it's from a guy who was in the Australian Army, and we actually used it in the report, and that is, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Therefore, impliedly not dealing with toxic behaviours, whether it be from the odd argumentative explosion or right the way through bullying and harassment, if it's not dealt with, it almost becomes a standard that you're accepting.
Yeah. And like a lot of these things, it's not just your own behaviour, but it's calling others out and holding them to that standard when you see that happening in the organisation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of what the survey told us. What then if, you know, I'm a leader in an organisation where I see some of this toxic behaviour, what could I do? What can we do to try and change things?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost it's important to understand, is there a problem and to what extent that problem exists?
Yeah.
So something that we would recommend is actually running a kind of diagnostic or an assessment to understand what is the sentiment within the organisation. And clearly this doesn't have to just pick up on toxicity, but what you will find is through that process you will find out if there are behaviours or attitudes or ways of working that might exist, how prevalent they are, and crucially how much of a problem it is for people. Because to your point, you know, yes, things might exist, but actually it might be kind of okay, it might be more tolerated, it might be maybe a cultural norm that things happen in certain ways, but equally it might be an underlying problem that is happening in the organisation that as a leader you might not even know about, and it's a burning fire over in the corner, your attention is elsewhere. And if you don't address these things, they can quickly escalate into becoming kind of more material challenges. So it's understanding first. Accountability would be a big one for me. So as leaders, we clearly have a duty of care over our staff, their well-being, the way that people act and operate within the workplace, right? So I think having a framework, having a program in place that really talks about what is the level and the standard that we expect, and that applies to our leaders as well as kind of staff within the organisation. So what is, you know, the standard that we accept? And then on the back of that, the third kind of key recommendation that we've included in our report is having an action on the back of toxic behaviour that is well kind of known and it, you know, people are aware of. So having the standards, but then also having consequences. Right. So it's you know, what we don't want to for this to be seen as is, you know, going in hard on people all the time. But it's important for people to understand that toxic behaviours won't be tolerated. That if they impact people, there are going to be consequences to that, and obviously that is specific to the organisation, but it should be well understood.
Great. Okay, so it's saying this is what the standard is in our organisation. This is the accountability. We're showing that everyone's accountable, and we're also showing that accountability through consequences for action around it.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so jumping into our second topic on today's episode, and that is culture change. So, Macdara, similar to what we did for toxicity, would you be able to just give everyone an overview of what we mean by culture change?
Yeah, of course. This is where, you know, maybe in an organisation certain initiatives around the people agenda or the culture have been identified as something people wanted to change. So many organizations run surveys and get feedback. Through that process, things are bubbled back up to senior management that people want to change. And the big question is what happens with that, right? So it's understanding how much of that stuff is actually being actioned by organizations versus just left to lie fallow and sit in a drawer. So that's kind of culture change. Could be around work-life flexibility. Say people in the organization all decide that they want to be able to work from home or have an opportunity to leave early on a given day. What's happening with that suggestion from the organization, or the leadership actively trying to help make that happen?
Okay, so a little bit around intent maybe versus inaction ultimately.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. So what did the survey tell us about culture change?
So this was kind of the most negative response to all of the questions that we asked in the survey.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was, really interesting. So here the question we asked was, culture change initiatives in my organization are backed by consistent action from leadership. So we had a 44% negative response to this question, where they either strongly disagreed or disagreed with that. So therefore, people felt that cultural change initiatives are not backed by consistent action from leadership. The big kind of key insight here was that frustration with lip service, and that kind of came through, right? Where there's words not backed by action. And there's something interesting there in that you'd be better off not doing anything than running a whole engagement process, getting feedback, getting input, getting clear ideas and suggestions from the organization that you then just shove in a drawer and don't do anything with. So it's really important that when embarking on this journey of cultural change and saying to the organization, we want to do this stuff, we want to work with you, that you follow through, because the level of disillusionment of engaging with them, getting ideas, getting input, we've been there. Something comes out, there are workshops put together, working groups, working through these initiatives, coming up with suggestions, doing everything, and it never goes anywhere. That is a real kind of slap in the face to people in the organization, and they really get frustrated with that. It's that lack of follow through. Yeah. It's not enough resources being put against these initiatives. It's that words versus deeds. We see it, the senior management stand up, they've got a few bullet points around this topic, but that's kind of it. And even worse, they maybe make promises that they don't ever deliver on. They keep kicking that can down the road, and it's just never met. It's kind of delayed and unfulfilled promises is kind of what came through.
And I can imagine what you're describing would create apathy amongst people. It may also make them less inclined the next time a similar exercise is performed to take part, right? They're going to just back away because they haven't seen the action from that.
Yeah.
So I guess with that in mind, what would you say are some actions that organisations can take around this?
Well, it's interesting. You and I were speaking with some clients today around commercial targets are really well embedded in most organisations. Revenue targets, profit targets, other risk items are usually very well monitored and part of the governance. What's often lacking are any of those kind of KPIs, key performance indicators around the people agenda and cultural change. So it's about elevating this area, bringing it into these forums and having key deliverables and targets against this stuff, right? Where there's accountability, there's ownership on this agenda. So where you have got a number of initiatives that they're being marked, looked at, reviewed, getting a RAG status, whatever it might be, and that's visible to the organization to see, how are we doing against that? You said that thing you were going to do. Are you doing it? And have you done it? So that's super important. Including the employees in the process. Are you engaging with them? Have you asked them for their ideas instead of trying to implement maybe what senior management think people want, right? So actually opening up the process, asking the organization what they want, how, and then giving them maybe some ownership of that. So you get the ideas, everyone agrees on the initiatives you want to take forward, empowering the organization to deliver on some of that, putting some budget behind it. It doesn't always have to be money, but time and resource, to actually help deliver this stuff instead of just paying it that lip service that got such negative scores. And also you can do things around storytelling and teaching the leadership how to speak this language and how they can learn to role model and communicate improvement in these cultural initiatives, that they know how to talk about it, articulate that, show the organization, we were here, we're now here, I've observed this today, which tells me this initiative is working and I'm really happy about that. So it's kind of some of it's learning that new language as well.
Okay, so thank you. So if I were to summarise that, then I think what I've heard is it's about having the right metrics in place to demonstrate success, to give that accountability. It's about ensuring that programs are visible, but they're also being engaged with the right people so that people feel part of the journey, they feel they're part of that success. And then it's also about the storytelling and the communication of these things and making sure that leaders are comfortable with how this kind of stuff gets delivered, but also recognised.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it.
Okay.
So George, we've covered 2 of the 4 topics from the survey. So just keen to get your thoughts on that, having finished those first 2.
Yeah, so I think our objective is to make sure that people are left with something actionable so that they find it insightful. I think my reflection on this episode is maybe that the 2 topics we've covered, because they received the 2 strongest negative sentiments of any of the questions, it could feel a little bit downbeat, and that's clearly not our intention, but we wanted to cover them together and focus on them. But I think everyone will be quite happy that in the next episode we're going to be covering the 2 topics that actually received the most positive sentiment.
Yeah, exactly. In the next episode we'll be looking at values to action, so that leadership trust where words are being backed up by action, and feedback and recognition. And it really jumped out there how, when done well, those things can have a huge positive impact.
So with that, we'd just like to say thank you, to everyone for tuning in, for listening, for watching. We look forward to speaking again next time. But with that, I'll say goodbye from him.
And goodbye from me.